Hey, welcome to my channel. I've had a few people ask me in the comment sections about pieces of accent paper I use in my mixed media work. Today I'm going to share with you the 3-layer process I use to create sheets of this paper. It's fun, easy, and it creates pieces of accent paper that is unique to you. So this is what I would call an accent paper or an opaque collage paper. Um, Often these are done on a mixed media paper rather than what I usually use, which is a tissue. And they're composed of several layers, which end up to be opaque, and they can be used in a variety of ways in my collage work. So this is composed of 3 separate layers. The first one is going to be the accent color. So that's going to kind of dictate what type of piece this will be useful in. In this case, this one has quite a bright green accent. It's combined, however, with darks and with kind of a cool opaque as a last layer. This one is also got a green accent, but it's been finished with a warmer opaque layer after the black. But it started off with a green. This is an example of one that started off with sort of an orangey yellow color. And there was actually some stamping and things that went on in there, but largely lost underneath. And as you can see, I've already taken out chunks of this one to use. This one has a purple accent color, and it's not terribly bright, which is good in some ways. Sometimes you just want a shape, or maybe you're really looking at the black shapes that you want to use in your work. And sometimes a bright accent color isn't necessary. And these are a couple of other ones. So there's 3 layers in the process, the accent color. After that, I'll be putting on vegetation and stencils as masks, and then we'll be printing this very dark color. And then once that's dry, some of the ones, not all of them, I'll be picking out and then applying this more opaque light color on top. So 2 to 3 layers on each of these. So for this project, I'm going to be using 3 kinds of paper today just to give me some varied results. This paper is just a mixed media paper that I have. It's acid-free. This is my standard Spectra art tissue. See, I haven't done this on this before. It'd be interesting to see how it works on that. And then I also have a few pieces of rice paper, which I think could be interesting as well. So the first step that I need to do is just to apply a background color. For this, I like to make it quite colorful. It doesn't matter whether it's opaque paint or transparent paint, just it all pretty much works the same. So this is where I may pull out my Amsterdam acrylics to use. Most of these are, kind of opaque, so this is maybe a good place to use them. And I like some of the interesting colors they have. I've also got some of my fluid acrylics, opaque ones like Titan Buff, Corn Silk Yellow, and also some of the metallics. Very nice bright yellow that I like is the Indian Yellow Hue by Golden. It's a lovely warm yellow. It's transparent. Can roll it out quite thin. And this is all just to create a base layer that we'll be using to get those nice bright highlights. This is the rice paper. Oh yeah, it's a lovely bright color. But I did want to try some actual gold, because this is all based on that comment about what's the goal behind that. How did you make those? So let's see how this goes. Now the fluids always roll out a little bit differently than the high flows. Find it's a little harder to get them even. It tends to show the marks in your brayering more than the heavy-bodied paints do. But you just have to be kind of patient and have a very light touch on the brayer. There we go. That has a lovely sheen, so we'll see what that does in step 2. Okay, so there's a little mixture of greens and golds. Trying to think of what I have in my stash right now, what color schemes I've been printing in over the summer. So what might I need to go with those? So that's always a thought. What have you got? What do you need? That's quite a nice green, not too acidic. I'm going to roll a little bit of my favorite transparent red iron oxide over here. This is still wet. This is open acrylic, so I've got time to fool around and play with it. And I'm just thinking I could make this kind of interesting by doing a combination of those colors. This is the rice paper again. It's an interesting background. So this is a Liquitex acrylic gouache. I'm going to give that a try on the plate. It's a beautiful color. It's not a color I go to all the time, but you know, I could get converted. But for what I want it for this purpose, it's going to be quite a small amount of it in the finished collage paper, so maybe it won't terrify me too much using it. Oh yeah, look at that. Beautiful color. I'll be able to compare the two pieces of paper. So this is a piece of rice paper, picking this side up, and then this side's, of course, the mixed media paper. It's a little thicker. Oh, and you can see that there's a little pollution from what I had on my roller, probably my roller, because I did clean the plate, but that's a pretty nice background. Interesting the difference in the kinds of paper. And this mixed media paper pulled up that pretty completely, whereas the rice paper left a bit of residue. And this looks darker and denser because it pulled more off. But quite pretty shapes, really. One of the color combinations I use a lot is just a tiny bit of the dioxazine purple with the transparent red iron oxide. And I'm just looking for a light background, so I'm not putting a lot of paint on here. I'm I'm trying to restrain myself. So I find the transparent red iron oxide just takes a little bit of the oomph out of the dioxazine purple, which otherwise can be, pretty intense. This is a piece of the mixed media paper. Oh, it should be an interesting color for step 2. So this background making is all just really pretty simple. One of the things it lets you do, though, is play with your colors and just see which ones, give you a nice light layer. Oh, this is quite interesting. So I've got quite a lot of the gold, and there's, it's shiny, definitely in spots, but I'm pulling up little traces of that blue violet and the odd bit of grunge from the, that, what was it, Titan green pale. So I think that's going to make a pretty interesting background. So here are the backgrounds I printed in step 1. These are the tissues, and I've got some nice different colors from, a darker, warmer accent color, sort of a light greenish. These are metallics. This is a metallic gold and metallic bronze, and then also just a faint lilac color as well. These are the backgrounds that I created on the mixed media paper. So this paper is already a little thicker. And I've got a really strong turquoise with some very interesting variegations in it, through to a lighter green, a bit of a darker green, sap green. I've got some nice warm ones, some metallics. This one's a really lovely one. It has some lilac in there from somewhere, and it's got some gold. And then I've also got some nice different shades of purple tones, red purples, blue purples, and everything in between. And last but not least, I have my rice paper. So this paper will not go as transparent as tissue paper when I collage it, but hey, this is already opaque, so it really doesn't matter. I have a nice strip of that turquoise with the green in it, and then a nice, fairly clear Indian yellow, and then one that was a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that could be very interesting as well. So I think we've got a nice selection of papers to go ahead and proceed with step 2, which is putting the darks over top. So we're ready for step 2, which is, I think, a pretty interesting sort of step. So we have printed the backgrounds, which you can see in here in a finished print is this color in here. The next step we're going to do is we're going to put a very dark color over pretty much everything, but we're going to save the accent color using some masks or stencils. Now, for the color for this black, I'm going to be using some carbon black mixed with some other colors like browns or blues to tint it, or you can also mix your own black using just dark colors. Now, what you use for your mask is going to determine how much accent color you save. So, for example, if I'm going to use grasses like that, which is, kind of my thing because I like botanicals, that's going to save some thin lines of that accent color. If you wanted to save more of the accent color, then you would use something that covered a little bit more of the plate. If you want, you could also use stencils. This tree stencil will also save a nice little fine network of those accent colors as well. But any stencil or mask that you have could definitely be used, and you just experiment with it to see what you like. The other possibility is using threads. You can make some very interesting patterns on your plate using different thicknesses of threads or yarns, and that can also leave just glinting little highlights of that accent color. So I'll do a few with this as well. Now I'm going to be using the golden open paint because I'd like this to not dry very quickly, um, and I'll get lots of prints out of it. If you don't have the open acrylics, you can take your regular heavy-bodied paints and add the open acrylic gel, about half and half with it, and that makes it work quite well as well. Now, depending on which background I'm printing on, I may not bother rolling up the entire plate. So I just roll up part of it for that one, for example. I'm going to start out with some carbon black. And I think for that yellow background, I'll mix a little bit of my favorite transparent red iron oxide. And I've just opened up a new jar, so I've got some to spare on my lid and also my thumb. Okay, we'll roll that out and see what it looks like. So sometimes it's a little hard to wrap your mind around the layers and what leaves what until you've actually seen it. So hopefully this first example will give you an idea of kind of what's going on here. So everywhere that I put some of this grassy stuff, I will be leaving that highlight color. And everywhere the grass is not, well, will become black or dark. Like I say, you could easily just use a stencil or some masks or some thread or whatever you feel like would make shapes that would be interesting to you. Okay, so there we go. Where we had, whoops, I'm going to drop that on the plate. Where we had the grass is now our highlight color, and everything else is dark. Now, I'm not going to be taking multiple prints from this because I would like a nice clean image each time. So I'm just going to add more paint. I think I'll stick with a bit of the black. It's a nice opaque color. It does help create a solid background, which for these accent papers is kind of what I'm looking for. Okay. Now this one is got some gold on it and some yellow. So that should be quite interesting. And I'm not looking to make a perfect print out of any of these. I'm looking to make little pieces that I can cut up and add to one of my collages as accents. Well, it's quite interesting. Even though the color on the background changed quite dramatically, it's not as noticeable when you actually go to look at the finished print itself. The other possibility you could do here would be to crumple your tissue or paper and then print it and take advantage of those crease marks that we sometimes try to avoid, but in this case might actually give you a really interesting texture. Do you see this part in back here? That is, that's quite interesting. Oops. This is some fishing line. And then I've also got This is, it's going to be too bulky. I think I'll do some threads as well, some fine thread. When I visit friends who do a lot of sewing and stuff, I always see if I can snag a few samples of threads. There we go. Now this tissue's got a bit of one and a bit of the other on it. Let's see how this thread thing works out on it. A little bit easier to push it down with the threads than it is with the vegetation. The vegetation's always got some spring to it, unless you really flatten it beforehand, which I always forget to do. And depending again on how much color you want, if you push the threads in a little bit more, you will get less accent color. If you don't bother, then you will get more. Oh, look at that. So I quite like that. I think that whole thread thing is maybe a good idea. Oh yeah. And because I had some dioxazine purple in the dark layer, some of that is coming through on this as well. So I can imagine taking a chunk of this or a strip and adding that to a collage. I'm just looking at spaces here. Do I need something to interrupt that space? Does it make interesting little shapes in the black? You know, that kind of thing. So let's start off. This is quite a light yellow-green. And one thing about the mixed media paper is it's harder to push it into the cracks between the vegetation strands or into the cracks in the mask or the stencil than the tissue is. The tissue is easier to push in. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a clean brayer and just give it a bit of a squish. Without... Oh, there we go. This is this turquoise one. Oh yeah, that's quite interesting. So this is another print on the mixed media paper. And now I'm just switching to a stencil. This is a very detailed stencil of a tree that I did a couple of years ago. It's nice to get some more mileage out of it. And I'm using a warmer paper for this one. And I quite like this. I can totally see taking a strip one way or the other out of this and using it in a collage. Now the next piece of paper is going to go over another tree stencil, and this is my nice metallic gold paper. Sometimes I think you just have to kind of go with the flow with these things. This print came out so well that I don't think I'm going to do a third layer on it. I think I'll hang on to it and either make it the star of a collage work or perhaps cut it up into bits. So this is another one of the purple prints. And now I'm switching over to the rice paper. And the more I use this rice paper, the more I like it. Certainly for this type of piece of collage paper work, because I don't need it to be terribly transparent when I glue it down, because of course it's opaque already. And it seems to be able to pick up more paint than the tissue. And yet it also maybe gives you a bit of a better impression with the detail than the mixed media paper does. So this is a very nice warm color, and you can see how rich and black the background is. And this is a second one. Again, a nice warm yellow color and a nice warm black background. Okay, so let's take a look at the results of layer number 2. First of all, let's quickly look at the tissues. So these are quite soft and flexible in terms of collaging onto different surfaces. And I think I've picked up the accent color quite nicely. Now, interestingly enough, not all of these became super dark, but that's okay too. I've got some interesting things to work for. So that's a light yellow-green. And this one is that copper iridescent. This one is gold on this side and just something else over there, but it actually flows through just fine. And then these ones I thought were quite interesting. These ones were the threads, and of all the materials, definitely the rice paper and the tissue picked up the thread patterns best. And I can just see taking a chunk out of some area of that and using it in a collage. And this one I quite like because it's kind of got the two-tone color thing going on, so it might make an interesting strip going that way. These are the mixed media papers, and they picked up the black really quite well. So I have grasses in a variety of colors. Now this one was made with my tree stencil. A little bit fuzzy, didn't get as clear an impression on that, but again, if I'm looking at sections of it, or perhaps some vertical lines, that could be quite interesting. This one I love. This one is the gold, and it has just a lovely pattern in the dark behind the gold, and the gold looks really good. And I'm actually going to pull this one out of this tutorial and because I think I'm going to want to use it for something else. And then I've got some other ones. This particular type of grass wasn't maybe as interesting, but this is where putting the third layer on will be quite interesting. And then there's some more grasses in the different shades of purples that I did. And then I have the 3 pieces of rice paper. This one came out quite interestingly, and I think the black is also interesting. I might try some more rice paper with the threads on it, with just white in the background. That could be quite good. But I love that blue. This one I think will be perfect for layer 3. We've got a good solid dark going on. The accent is nice, and also this one. And this paper is not as thick as the mixed media paper, so it will collage a little flatter. So now I'm going to pick out which ones are going to get a third layer and go from there. So now comes step 3. This is the last layer, and what we want to do in this layer is put down a light opaque that is going to create the shapes in the black of whatever we want. So in this particular example, I've used leaves plus a bits of string to create a pattern, and then that's what sort of saves the black in those areas. And all of the rest of the paper is covered with whatever opaque light color I choose. Now, in addition to plants, this is also a good place to use masks. So, for example, this mask here. This is one that I've created myself from a background print, which was very interesting to me. And so I created a Duralar stencil out of it. And I've got a video on that process. If you're interested, I'll link it in the videos above in the card. If you're interested in other shapes, there's lots of different masks that you can try. This is one I quite like too. It's just a mixture of letters and numbers, and I think it might make an interesting pattern on the plate. So I'm going to do a combination of vegetation and also stencils. So I have all my papers ready that have been through steps 1 and 2, and I've also got the paint ready. So I'll be using some titanium white. Again, I prefer to use the open acrylics, or at least in part. And then I've also got some nice light colors, titanium buff, corn silk yellow, titanium green pale. And then I've also got two of my favorites, which is the transparent red iron oxide and the ultramarine blue. So again, I'm kind of thinking about, which way does the paper need to go? How much of the plate do I need to cover? And then the biggest question you want to ask yourself is, in this particular print, how much black do I want to save? So I'm going to get started putting out some of the white. And then in this case, that one is a purple print. So I think it might be quite nice with a bit of the titanium buff and maybe just a smidge of anthracnone blue along that side. Now this has to be a thick enough layer to be opaque. So there's got to be enough paint on here for sure. In some cases, the white paint isn't kind of moving well enough, so I'm just going to give it a little circular motion. But I think I'm going to need a little bit more paint here. It just looks like it might not be thick enough to do the job. There we go. Once I get it mixed up on the plate, then I use a lighter touch to just smooth it over a little bit. Okay, and for this one, I think I'm going to use a couple of these stencils. This is the one with the threads on it. Stencils are quite easy to print with because they're not too thick. Oh yeah, there we go. So that's the effect I was looking for. I have the accent color, which in this case is a light lilac, and then the stark black, and then the opaque on top. Just going to lift those and roll this out again. Sometimes you add more paint. Sometimes this looks like it's going to be thick enough to do another print. There seems to be quite a bit there. Put my stencils down again. A little bit of a messy business. There we go. This is showing a little bit more of the blue, and the gold's really quite pretty. And now you can see the pattern that we've created in the black. Instead of being plain black, now it's got this pattern in it. Okay, so I've set up the plate in a warm, light, opaque, and I put on a variety of vegetation and some light string. So I'm going to use the rice paper on this that has the nice warm yellow background. And I'm getting the feeling as I proceed that the rice paper is a good choice for this particular process. It seems to be handling the multiple layers of paint, better than just the straight tissue is. Although the mixed media paper also stands up very well to the process. However, it will be a little thicker when I go to collage it, so won't be able to really tell which I prefer until I do that. But strictly from a print point of view, I'm quite liking the result that I'm getting on the rice paper. I'm going to put a little bit of the yellow on that side, and then just a little bit of the titanium buff, or pardon me, titanium pale green on this side. Let's see what kind of a combination that makes. And there's, of course, already a lot of white already on the plate that I'll be rolling up. And this is the one, it has, again, it's rice paper with a very warm background. Oh, I almost forgot to put things on there. That would not give me the result I wanted at all. I'm going to go back to using these stencils. They are a favorite of mine. They're one of my favorite plants, which is bindweed. And I just had a really, really good, strong, dark print and brought it into the computer, turned it into a stencil, and cut it on my Cricut cutter. Took a long time to actually do the work for all that, but I don't mind computer work. I quite like it. And of course, the nice thing is now that I've done the stencil, I can cut as many of them as I want to. Oh yes, that's quite pretty. This paper is harder to press down and to get into all the little crannies than, say, one of the rice papers or tissues. So having a brayer just makes that a little easier. A Baron would also be good. Oh yeah, that's kind of the thing I'm looking for out of these papers. There's some very interesting patterns. I can envisage a circle or a rectangle or some piece of this working its way into a collage. There we go. Now this one might be a little harder to squish down because this plant, which I think is alfalfa, might not be, but I think it is a little springier. Oh, yeah. See, now that actually gave me a really interesting pattern on there. This is one with a metallic underneath, and you can just see a nice bit of that glint. It's quite nice. Now, this is the one I did through the stencil before, so it's going to actually have quite a lot of this nice warm brown color coming through in it. Oh yes, look at that. And again, you know, what I'm after here is strips and parts and bits. So that will be quite interesting. So this is that acrylic gouache that I was using in the background section, layer number 1. And I think this might make a nice background for what I've got coming up next, which is 2 or 3 prints in the green spectrum. So this is what it looks like before. And this is what it looks like after. So this one is quite a vibrant yellow-green, and it's got a cool green, slightly green background, and of course the black. I do a lot of neutral mixed media collages, so I'm kind of hoping this year to do a bit more with some turquoises and some greens in them. I really like these shapes that come out. And this bit of an accent that's running through it is just nice. So let's take a look at our finished accent papers and also how we might use them. So this is an example of one of the ones that I did on tissue. So it's quite thin. It should collage quite well on most surfaces. And this one was created with light purple in layer 1, uh, threads and string on layer 2, and then a couple of my stencils in layer 3. And what I would be doing with this is I would be taking little L's like these and looking for possibilities. Is there something in there which I think might fit in some type of a collage? And it'll just depend. I mean, sometimes I'll be looking for a strip that might go along an edge or come out of a side. Other times I could be looking for something that's more circular. So I could start with something like that. And then if I wanted a circle, I could, put a circle and cut that out of there. But that's how I go about using these. So this is another one of the tissues. It has metallic gold on this side, and it worked out quite well with the blue in the opaque layer. And again, it's done with some of the stencils. And again, there's quite a lot of different possibilities here. Things the shape of a bookmark, for example, or other chunks that might be of use. And sometimes I find there's something weird along an edge that I can cut out and just use a strip of. These are a couple of the ones that I did on the mixed media paper. So this paper is a little stiffer, so it's quite good if you're layering it on top of something that's stiff, but it will leave a little bit of an edge. And again, I would go through the same process of seeing what I can find in here that appeals to me. I very much like these little tentacles coming out in this one. And the combination of the lime green and the bluey green is interesting. And then this is one with kind of a rough opaque layer. And I find myself actually kind of drawn to it. I like those extra little hints of blue that are over here on this side. And then the fact that it's sort of more of a dusty opaque color on that side. And I do like the fine grasses that I used in layer 3 that saved those little streaks of black. And I'm also quite pleased with the 2 rice paper examples. They printed really well, and I'll definitely be using this material more often. And when I use my little L's, I can definitely find things in here which will be of interest. I think it's just exploring it and not being afraid of cutting it up. If you're a little hesitant about cutting up a favorite piece, my recommendation is to make more of them until they're not precious any longer. And here's the last one. This one was also done on rice paper with stencils and with the grasses. And it has a more sort of a warm background as opposed to the cooler background that we see in this one. So I very much hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that you'll be able to use some of the ideas in here, take them further. I'd love to hear what you do with these ideas in the comments section. Please let me know. And if you'd like to see how I use my accent papers, there's a link on the screen now which will take you to gel printing and mixed media, video number 8 and video number 9, which are about adding paint to my mixed media and also how to solve problems in mixed media. See you in the next video.